Hey, what's going on? How are you guys doing? We're back with another episode of AI Thoughts Online. I am super excited because we got some pretty dope people here today, and we're talking about a topic that is pretty important to me. So I'm expecting some spicy takes. Which is the use of AI in education. So I have some, like I said, some pretty dope people here with me today. I've got Jay Lavoie, one of my fellow Marymount University students, Amber Ivey, aka AI, and Stacey, who is one of our fellow BGH members. So I will let them introduce themselves, and we'll go ahead and kick off today's episode.
All right. Well, thanks, Tennisha. I'll jump things off. Again, thanks for having me here. As Tennisha said, I'm a fellow student at Marymount University in the Doctor of Science in Cybersecurity program, presently in my final semester, so hoping everything's going to go well and I'll graduate this summer. My background is in cybersecurity. I presently work for Marine Corps Systems Command as a lead systems engineer for their program manager, intelligence and cyber operations portfolio underneath the terrestrial human intelligence manager, and I'm on the terrestrial collections system project. We provide all of the maritime and ground sensor capabilities for the intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance Marines that are deployed all across the globe. I've been there for about 2 years now, and aside from that, just an interesting tidbit, I've been a recipient of the SMART Scholarship Award since my undergrad at University of Maryland Global Campus. They funded me for the undergrad program, my master's, and of course my doctoral program. So if anybody's listening in on this podcast and they're interested in having their schooling paid for and getting a clearance, having a guaranteed government job after graduation, definitely feel free to reach out to me, and I'd love to connect with you to talk more about the program. I'm a big proponent of that. But again, thanks, Tennisha, for having me here, and looking forward to the opportunity.
That sounds like a super dope opportunity. AI?
Hey folks, my name is Amber Ivey, also known as AI. It used to be Allen Iverson, but now it works for artificial intelligence. So super excited to join you all. My background is data and performance management. I also dabble a bit in AI. I am a voice of a woman of color AI. Her name is Clara, vis-a-vis a group called Create Lab. So if you ever hear her talking, I didn't say any of it. She was just trained on my voice. And I also have a AI for Kids company called AI Digitales with a book out that is called AI Meets AI. So check it out, and I'll kick it over to Stacey.
Thanks, AI. I'm Stacey. I'm a BGH member. I am fairly new to the cybersecurity industry. I've been a cybersecurity analyst for about 6 months, and that's all due to the training that I got through BGH. Shout out to Tennisha. So I'm probably here more so to listen and take notes, more so than talk about AI. I've been interested in it since I found out about it, and I'm looking to learn more and hopefully help with BGA coming out of a program for other members to take advantage of. So just happy to be here.
Awesome. All right. So now that we've got the introductions out of the way, let's get started on our topic today, which is the use of artificial intelligence in education. I think I probably mentioned in one of the previous episodes that I was a teacher at HBCU for about 3 years. So I've got some pretty strong feelings on this topic. So just to level set, the use of AI in schools, since it's come out, has been pretty interesting because schools have pretty much taken, I think, one of three approaches to the schools. So far, public schools have followed one of three strategies: either banning it altogether, integrating it into the curricula, or placing it under further review. But regardless of what it is that they've done, I think that it's important that there be some kind of consistent policy. We haven't seen that from I think a top-down approach coming from the school systems. Some schools have taken, very strong approaches on it, but we haven't seen anything just from I think, a legislative perspective in terms of the way to use it within the education system. I know a lot of my students have been using it to do things like, basically, hey, write my paper or write my discussion question, and then they'll submit that without modifying it with the grade background and everything. So I've always felt like, you know what, they need to, get rid of it altogether within education. And if you checked out our first episode with myself and AI, you'll see that we started to get into this, and I was like, no, we need to have a whole separate conversation about this, because she's got a very unique perspective on this. And for me, I'm like, what are you learning if you are basically having AI write your paper for you, and basically copying and pasting whatever AI spits out, and then put it into your paper to submit it. So that's what we're talking about today. And I've got Stacey here also because one of the things that we're doing within BGH is working on a like zero to hero style program for AI education. So like, what certifications are out here? What training opportunities are out here? What different educational resources are available out here? And she's been doing a lot of research as a part of the development of our AI security training program. So, I brought her in to talk about her experience and just looking at what the landscape looks like. So we'll go ahead and kick off the conversation, which I'm super excited about. So our first question is, and it's a hot topic, should schools ban or integrate AI in classrooms? Anybody want to kick us off? AI, you're laughing. Go ahead and shoot.
Okay. All right. So I probably would, in my opinion on that, I think is this, I look at the use of it in school similar to the way that certain arguments are made about AI being open source. And now I say that to say that in having students use it in school, there's a two-prong approach that can come out of that. So for instance, if you've got kids using generative AI, you've got teachers or professors on the other end of that are having to monitor it, if you will, police it. I think what it will help with is allowing schools to have certain mechanisms in place to catch people who would maybe be using it to plagiarize or to maybe not do certain things as far as their work is concerned. So that little bit of governance that you may be able to glean from what is going on within the school system could help to build stronger protocols that could be used across the board. If schools K through 12 and on into the collegiate arenas, as well as probably having some use cases and other scenarios for certifications in the workplace, things like that. On the flip side of that, I'll take my gray hat or black hat hacker thought process on that. And how kids are, a lot of times they're trying to find ways to circumvent protocols that are in place to stop them from doing things, and a lot can be learned from that as they get in and either break things or circumvent things. That it gives us a chance as cybersecurity professionals to say, okay, here's how they circumvented that. How can we build something, within the AI system itself that, prevents this from happening in the future? So there's a little bit of a research aspect that could go on in this live model, if you will, as far as it being, allowed in school. And I'll close that thought out just by saying, I have found it really interesting in that I've not really used AI very much, even going into my doctoral program, and I'm seeing some of the benefit. I don't want to say that people need to use it to get work done or skip past what they need to learn, but I can see some of the pitfalls that can be in place, when using AI. And as you said, Tennisha, if somebody's using it, if they're called on the spot for something, chances are they're not going to know the answer to it, right? Because they don't understand the principles behind whatever the topic is that they're talking about. So very similar to math, in my opinion, is a very strong use case. Say a student's not very strong in algebra, but they can go on, type in an algebra question and get the answer. Okay, great. Now, paper, here's a piece of paper, solve that problem. Not going to be able to do it because they don't understand it. But that's a lot harder to check when you've got, a class of 30 students, or you're policing a school that's allowing the use of AI. So I can see how that could be a problem. So I'm definitely interested in hearing just some of the input from people who've actually taught, or are dealing with that in the current educational system, because that's an interesting perspective to hear.
So Tennisha already knows where I am on this, but I'm going to answer it for everyone else who didn't watch episode 1, but go back. So I want to start with this. There's a school in Austin, Texas right now called, I think it's Alpha School. And there's a lady there who created a private school where AI is teaching the kids. Like literally, there's AI teaching the kids, and there's a whole bunch of teacher assistants that are there literally to assist the kids. But they spend, I think, a total of 2 hours working with the AI tool. And then they literally go on to do other things and learn life skills and other things they need to learn. What they're finding in that model is that the kids who are going through that process are actually having better educational outcomes. So that's one side of the world. The other side of the world is we're literally banning AI tools, and we're not showing or not letting kids get access to it when there's a whole school of private kids in Austin learning how to use the tools and only spending 2 hours a day in AI and then getting to be kids and learn other life skills. So I want to start with that. The other piece is that all the things I always ask when people say I want to ban it, why? Like, what are the risks? So what I hear from people is that kids are going to plagiarize. We've been plagiarizing since the beginning of man and since the beginning of mankind. So that doesn't fix that. Kids are not going to learn. We've been doing that with calculators, right? A lot of kids don't even show their work anymore. Like TI-83, I remember, and I think I talked about this last time, when I was in my calculus class, my teacher made us not use a calculator. We can only use a 4-function calculator. We couldn't use a TI-83 or a scientific calculator. We had to learn calculus and literally have 10 pages of work because she wanted us to learn that. So I understand that, and we should still teach those skills. But right now, most humans aren't in jobs where they're going to need they're going to need to be able to do long form math. The calculator is there for that, so you can focus on other things. So a lot of times when people say the risk, I'm like, but that's already been here. Like I was in a master's program and people were copying and pasting full Google text areas without AI. So I've seen this happen. It's always been a problem. So I always push back and say, if we ban it, why? If we're banning it just because we're scared of it or we don't want kids to cheat, that's not the reason we should do it. Let's ban it for an actual reason where we can ask the kids who are going to say why, and we don't have an answer, and then we have the same problem. So I'll just start there, and I know we're going to dig deeper, but I'm in the camp of letting kids use the tool because AI is akin to the internet, if not even more advanced. If your kids were banned from the internet when it first came out, or we were banned, I mean, that's our generation. If we were banned from the internet when it first came out, we would be so far behind. And if you ban one group, which is often people that look like the people in this room, and the other group has a private school in Austin, Texas, where they're literally learning and advancing and doing all these things, you then have a bigger gap. We should use it responsibly, and we should teach kids how to use it so it's an interactive thing they're using and not something they're just using and prompting, saying, write a paper. Some teachers are using it to help kids enhance their writing. How can you prompt the AI to enhance what you've done? Show me your before, your after. Okay, what did the AI do well? What did the AI do wrong? Okay, have the AI write something. What is wrong with what the AI wrote? What is wrong in this? Go look online to see what parts of this are not true. There are ways to have kids interact with these tools that can help them to grow and develop, and doesn't mean ban AI. Plus, I said this before, you can't ban AI because those are my initials. So it has to work, it has to succeed, or I don't know what I'm going to do. I'll go by Ivy or something like that.
You're going to have to change your name up.
I don't want to. It's like been here.
I have always said that I did not have to remember anything that I could Google. And I think over time that has not aged well because, realistically, that means that I'm not learning a lot of things, if that makes sense. And I feel like by taking the process, the growing pains out of the education process of having to do research for a paper, of having to, figure out, like reputable sources, how to write and, put together sentence structure and use proper English. There are still grown adults who don't know the difference between, there, and there, or, so, and I feel like if we allow, AI in the schools, artificial intelligence in the schools, because Amber is 100% allowed. If we allow that, then I think that it's going to remove a lot of the process and the growing pains out of that process. I know for me, like, when I'm installing like a Kali box, from scratch, for example, and I, run into errors, researching those errors are part of the growing process that helps me to understand how it works, how things works. And I think that without that growing process, that they're missing a lot of pieces of the process. if I can just have the write my papers for me, you know what I'm saying, then I'm not learning about grammar. I'm not learning about sentence structure. And you have people who have, you know, limited vocabularies who are not able to articulate themselves well, you know? And I think that that's going to have an impact, not just socially, but I think in the workforce as well, because, you know, are you going to have them write, you know, have AI write all of your PowerPoint presentations, or if you have to write a plan or, you know, documentation for work, you know what I'm saying? Are you putting that into AI? I think there's been a lot of companies who have gotten in trouble recently because their proprietary code or information has been available in, you know, various models. And I feel like, you know, it's going to be a problem at some point, if it's not already.
One thing I wanted to comment on that I'd actually would be interested in learning more about is the private school that Amber was talking about. I'm assuming they probably teach, you know, different areas, not just like, you know, IT related type curriculum. So I'd be interested to know if there's been any impact on the kids who are being taught with that approach, and its impact, say, on like ACT or SAT scores first, because hey, if there's a positive impact, then maybe if we look at that on a larger scale, could that be applied to, you know, general education? Because I'm sure, as most of us probably know in this room, I mean, there are a lot of skills in the United States, well, globally, but I'm just saying here in the United States that are not IT centric. But with the advance of AI, you know, there's going to be a lot of job displacement, as people have talked about. So having, you know, better access to these learning curves that not only we have as adults, but catching kids early on with this technology, I think would be a great idea. So I would be really interested to see if there's, you know, any correlation between, you know, the kids that are learning with that approach compared to the traditional methods. Because personally speaking, I feel like you know, experiential learning is probably one of the best ways that I learn. I know not everybody's like that, but you know, there's a lot to be said for, okay, I'm learning about a VM. You talked about spinning up a Cali box, right? Well, I mean, I can read a number of articles online that talk to me about how to do that, but where I learned the most, like you said, when I had to go and download the Kali ISO, and did I want to use VirtualBox? Did I want to use VMware? What were the differences? And when I installed it, what were the error messages that I started to get, and why? You know, what did I run into when I was trying to get the guest editions, you know, installed, and that wasn't working? Well, it's very different when you've done it and you can do it over and over again, and it becomes, you know, innate at that point. So if there's a way to get more experiential learning in for kids outside of the traditional methods that they use in school, you know, it might make a difference just in terms of the educational system overall for the United States, because we're, you know, not at the top where that's concerned, and something as simple as, you know, technology use or more of it in schools could make a difference.
So to respond, Jay, to your question around some of the results, so they have early results, still a newer school, but their early results show also, because it's not evidence-based in my mind, because there's other things going. Like Austin is a certain group of people, certain people live there, certain economic attainment is there, but what they've seen is that most of the kids in their school do score in like the 99th percentile across most subjects, not every grade, but across most subjects, they're doing better. And they've seen individual growth in kids. And I think the thing of why it works is back to your point of experimental learning, like you're actually going, or experiential learning, excuse me, you're actually going, you're doing 2 hours. Kids should not be in a chair for 8 hours. It's just my opinion, but that's a conversation for another day. You have a kid in a chair for 2 hours getting learning, whether it's language, arts, English, etc., science, whatever it is. Then they're going on to build an IKEA desk. Like literally, they may be building an IKEA desk as they're learning other skills that are operating other parts of their brain so they can learn how to be a well-rounded human. And I feel like when I was younger, I had a good mix of learning and then going to do something with my hands to help me be able to like act as a child and not sitting in front of a classroom where I'm getting 8 hours of learning. And they modeled it off of homeschooling, because homeschooling has learned like doing it in buckets has been more helpful for some of the kids. So that's the approach they're trying to take. So I just wanted to respond to that.
Yeah, that's interesting that you even say that. Just a comment. So I was actually, for first grade, I was homeschooled and ended up going to public school right after that. So for second grade on, and then got to sixth grade, was homeschooled, and then next following year for 7th grade, when in public school. One of the things that was, when I think about what you were talking about just now, is that, you're right. There was a lot of curriculum that I would go through for the homeschooling piece, but my parents were both, they owned their own, tiny business. They had like a tiny consignment store. Well, I would spend my time doing my schoolwork in one of the back rooms, but during that time when I was done and I was coming out, and I'd watch my mom she was using like MS-DOS at the time with floppy disks, to do backups for their, with the work that they were doing there, and, creating, tickets that they were going to use to put on the clothes that were going out, and sorting items, and, I'd watch my dad do different things in the store. So there was a lot that I probably picked up that I didn't realize until I got older, right? And even something as simple as having a job when I was in high school, I learned a lot because I was around adults for the second part of my day while I was at work. So picking up, communication skills, communicating with people from different backgrounds, different walks of life, that all those things really play into the development for younger people that I think a lot of it's missed. And it may just be a sign of the times. I don't know. But for me, I think that's a major skill set that if they have a way to incorporate that into the academic system, would definitely make a big impact. So I like that response. That's interesting to know. So thanks for sharing that.
So I think I'm kind of on the fence, but I'm leaning more towards allowing AI because eventually it's going to take over all of us anyway. We're all going to be in Skynet at some point. So we might as well learn to embrace it. Like I have a coworker, he's doing his master's and they can't use AI. And they have some type of detection that will like show that you're using AI. And he had like a classmate get expelled for it. So there are things out there that I guess they use to detect it. And I think guidelines could be built around it, especially with like younger kids, elementary, middle school, where this is what you can do, this is what you can't do, just don't copy and paste the paper and submit it as your own work. So there has to be certain guidelines, but I don't believe in banning it altogether permanently. I think especially younger kids, they need to be able to use the tools. And even though I'm like, oh, like when people write and I'm like, I don't understand what you're trying to say to me because you don't really know how to formulate sentences and paragraphs, it irritates me. And I think maybe there's other ways around, going back to teaching kids grammar, but they can still use the online tools and spell check and everything else that we use modern day, but still learn proper grammar and structure and all that stuff too. So I say don't ban it, but absolutely put some guardrails around it so that everybody can use it.
So to your point, I think that we're losing a lot of the experience of having a sentence structure that has like this is your topic sentence, and then you have three supporting sentences, and paragraph structure, and I think a lot of that is lost, and from the youth as I've seen it thus far. I think that learning how to do an appropriate research paper is also a lost art. But I mean, realistically, I don't know that we can necessarily ban it like 100%, right? Despite the fact that I feel like, it should be. I don't think we realistically can because, if you look at a lot of the things that we use, Microsoft Word, for example, has like, an AI, like, prediction algorithm that's in there that says, hey, is this what you're about to type? Or is this, an email, for example, they have a sentence completion where I'll start typing something out, and then Gmail or Outlook will be like, "Hey, is this what you want to say?" Or on my phone, for example. But the problem is that I think that people go through or lose that experience of learning how to properly articulate themselves, and it shows. Because you have, I watched something online on Twitter the other day, and like literally every other sentence was like bro, or, like if you can't articulate how you're feeling without saying, I'm saying, what I'm saying, for example, if you can't articulate yourself, if you haven't learned how to be able to express yourself or, put together an appropriate argument about something, You know, like, can you imagine being like a grown, like fully formed adult and like having arguments with somebody who every other word is, you know, bro, and they can't express themselves or their thoughts? You know, I think that that's what's at stake when we say, you know, let them use AI, you know. But I mean, at the same time, you can't necessarily get around it. And I think also when we talk about the and that was actually my next question. When we talk about the tools that teachers can actually use to basically assess the papers, to determine whether or not they are have been created by AI, people who use proper English are consistently accused of using AI, because realistically, what it's looking for is, you know, like, hey, is this appropriate sentence structure, for example? You know what I'm saying? Like, are these words put together too perfectly? For example, and I've seen a lot of things recently where, you know, people have been falsely accused, and I would hate to have somebody, you know, kicked out of school, like Stacey was talking about, getting kicked out of their program, for example, being accused of using AI, and they just in reality just had proper grammar and sentence structure.
I do know OpenAI, to that point, OpenAI did have a classifier. They realized it wasn't working and they pulled it down. So it is interesting to wonder, like, if they are using something that can truly classify, because literally the leader in this right now, or at least one of the leaders, said they couldn't even figure it out, right? So that's something to consider. The other piece is that I get your points, Tennisha, 100%. I'm here. I'm listening. You are my girl. My questions are, AI as a full thing where people understood just came out the end of 2022 in a way that folks could really use, or when I don't know what year it is. Y'all know when it came out, sometime in November of 2022. But then we've had these issues with what they now call Gen Z language, which is basically Ebonics with a different group attached to it. And it's called Gen Z language. And they use things like bro, not full sentences and things like that. Like that's been existing for some time now. So that wasn't an AI thing. That's just a human thing. And also like kids, like, I don't want to use that many words to say something, and I can say 2 words. We already also are using hieroglyphics again through emojis. Like we've been doing that. I like rejected emojis for a very long time because I'm like, we're literally reducing English language. And I was like, forget it. A thumbs up or a smile is how we're communicating. We're not using words. So I say that to say there are already things in our society that are making it easier for us to go. And someone reminded me, like, humans look for the lowest energy state, like that's physics. So you're just getting a bit of that. So we have to question, are we okay with this low energy state and where we're going to go here? Or if we need to look at other things to ensure at the same time, we're helping people learn how to do these things. Because what we don't want in 100 years is we have a whole bunch of humans around who don't even know how to repair the technologies that they built and don't even know how to build them again because we lost the skill set. So I do agree with that.
Yes. Go ahead, Jay.
Oh no, I was just going to say that, kind of what you're talking about too is the potential for, I think what they refer to it as like a event horizon, right? So in theory, if you think about, I don't know, even like military strategies or certain views that people in the United States may have compared to 100 years ago, as each generation starts to cycle out, the people who are in place right now that are like generals right now that run our military, they're going to be phasing out soon, where you're going to have millennials that are going to be in those roles, and then not long after that, you've got Gen Z folk. So with the trends that are popular and the thoughts that are popular, you're going to probably start to see changes potentially just in the way that things are done. So something as simple as communication, I can't fathom being in a corporate environment or even in a government environment like where I work and people saying, like you said, bro, or just sending an emoji in a professional email to explain a situation and that be okay. Now, that's not to say that if the person in charge of my command was Gen Z, does that change the culture now? Because that's what the norm is from Gen Z on down. So at that phase, when you start to get there and go beyond, and if there are advances in AI, we're looking at that event horizon where now I don't want to use the word dumbed ourselves down, but we've hit that low energy state to a point where AI is so more advanced than we are that we can't control it. And that's that scary piece that you like to hear about in the news, that you talk about, oh, it's going to take over, humans and replace us. In theory, yes, if it gets that far, it could, but that also comes at the risk of us not staying on top of our education and how we are, those things that make us human and communicate in the way that we do and make the world run. If those things change, that could potentially happen. So you're right, Amber. I think that's a huge piece that really needs to be explored. And how do we keep that from happening? Because each generation has their own way of looking at things and speaking. That just kind of comes with it. But I don't know how that would change, how we can keep that from changing over time. But it is a serious reality that we could face.
So, I mean, I think if we look at, go ahead, Stacey.
Well, even in corporate environments, I know people use a lot of Slack. So you're sending short messages and emojis and gifs to your managers and to your coworkers and all these things. So it's already there, right? And even with written communication, like I was a notary for years, and the amount of people who don't even know how to do a signature was crazy to me. So a lot of that stuff is just really getting phased out. And it's unfortunate. I mean, maybe we can start like some type of old school handwriting class. I don't know. But I think we're just really moving away from there. Unless something happens to where it's going to stop it, we're not ever going back to handwritten papers and all that
But
stuff.
people don't use checks anymore. Like, I feel like, how do you get through life and not know how to do a signature? Like, I'm showing my age, okay. But I mean, I know that
No,
for
they
some of
don't.
my doctors, you said no.
They don't
Some of my doctors do not have like electronic payments. You can either give them a card when you in there, like, but if they send you a bill, they
really.
want you to send a check. You know what I'm saying? Like, not go to this website, but send a
So
check. What are you going to do?
everything's
Like, I
online.
in
Everything. You
theory,
check in online. You do everything. You schedule your text messages, everything.
but if we talk about what the future of what AI is going to look like, maybe a year or two down the line, right? You would expect realistically that any of the low level, low hanging fruit, especially anything that's repeatable, automatable, is going to be replaced by an AI, right? Which means that the requirement for the workforce of the future, in my mind, is one that is educated and is able to do things like critically think and able to problem solve, is able to approach problems that require things like situational awareness, for example, right? And I think that without all of those things are obtained by being able to face adversity and actually having problems to be solved, and working some of those things and thinking about them critically. And I feel like if you have something that has the ability to be able to do that for you, to Jay's point, in a professional setting, if you're asked to communicate or provide a presentation, and you can't properly, articulate yourself, what is that going to do to business? What is that going to mean for the people who are coming up who necessarily, you know, don't have those skills? Are they going to be like, hey, the millennials are the last people who knew how to sign a check, and generation whatever are the last people who knew how to write cursive, or whatever the case may be, and I think that realistically, in order for us to be able to continue to grow, especially within an education setting, we have to basically exist in a space above where AI is able to effectively operate, or reliably, I should probably say.
But do we? So yeah, I'm that person. No, but seriously, so like I forgot what our reading. I live in Baltimore, Maryland. I forgot what our reading level is. It's low.
It's like fifth grade for newspaper, fifth or sixth grade for newspaper.
And I don't even think we hit that, is what I'm saying. Like it's worse than, like, our literacy rate for people reading at grade level is very low in the city. And I'm sure other cities have some of the same problems. And that's pre-AI. So I just want to say that. And let me say one smart comment, and then I'm going to say what I was trying to get to. Like, I don't want to talk like old English people were talking 100 to 200 years ago. Like, if you think about just language and how it just changes very quickly, especially with the internet. Everyone sounds the same. Like, we are all using the same types of words because we're all like seeing and having access to all these people, whereas language would take a while to transform. But I don't want to talk in the old English way. Like, I don't see a need for that. But I'm sure when people who were talking with those accents and who still do look at American English, they're like, what is wrong with your English? It's trash. And you'll hear people who live in the UK say our English is horrible, right? So I don't want to be there, but I also don't want to be at the end where we're literally writing in emojis and no one's using words. Like, that's an extreme version. I brought up the literacy rate piece, two reasons. One, we're already at that point in a lot of places, particularly Black cities. We have an issue with that. And we know that a lot of these kids are being left behind and aren't able to get the resources. Like, I brought this up in our first conversation, Tennisha, around like Dr. Chapala over at Johns Hopkins. His whole idea is like have one teacher with 26 AI teachers. And what that literally means is teachers focus on the middle. They do not focus on the kids in the back. Those kids get pushed into special ed or just left behind. They do not focus on those kids. They cannot. They don't have time, and they don't focus on the front. They focus on the middle of the pack and try to move the middle as far as they can. Imagine if each student had their own AI teacher, tutor. Khan Academy is already doing it, where it literally has an AI that you can interact with, and it helps to tutor your kids. So we can get rid of a lot of these skills aren't being taught because teachers don't have time. They're teaching to the test. So that system has been gone since 97 or whenever it was, 98, when standardized testing started coming in and we stopped learning. We just started teaching to a test. So imagine if we brought back the ability for teachers to work with students at an individual level. I would much rather have my niece sitting in front of the teacher teaching and the AI working with her to make sure she's keeping up versus her getting left behind because she's not able to keep up and not able to ask questions that she needs because there's 26 kids in her class. So I think there's ways to use AI so that they can help the kid learn. And I think that's a great use case. And places in China are already using some of these tools to help out and ensure their kids are where they need to be. And we hear about after school and things like that. But I really wish we could literally have AI tutors, AI assistants in the medical field. Like, AI has helped solve a lot of issues and problems that humans just don't have time to solve. And we have a teacher shortage. That's not getting better. We have such a big worker shortage. We can either say, like you said, like AI can either help us keep up or it will leave us behind. Like, to me, that's the option, is we use it to get smarter very quickly, or we just sit around and just be in our current state, which I think is not the right place to be.
Yeah, the just to piggyback on that, and I can't cite the source because I'm forgetting. I meant to write it down, but I heard it probably about a week or two ago. So the literacy rate actually for, I think, America as a whole is something like 60% or a little over 60% of the population that reads at like a fifth grade level. So, when you think about that on the scale that they're talking about in terms of number of United States, it's a huge impact on everything that we do. Not to say that uneducated people don't make, the best decisions, but they don't make educated decisions. I guess you could argue that, because we lose a lot of that because we're not all at the same level. And so I like the idea what you're talking about, where you've got an AI teacher, for instance, per student. That to me sounds like a really awesome approach to education, and I could see that having a big benefit. I've even seen a 60 Minutes episode. It had to be maybe 4 or 5 months ago. They were talking about China's use cases of AI in schools, and so what they were doing, some teachers, like, they were teaching young kids. I'm thinking maybe like second grade, third, fourth grade, in that area. So they've got like a camera, set up in the classroom, and the AI is able to detect, is a student, in jeopardy of nodding off? Are they tired? Are they losing focus? Something as simple as that could allow a teacher in real time to, engage that student, right? Pull them back in. Those are little tips and tricks that they're using AI that, are separating them out from where the United States is in terms of how we're utilizing AI. And so if they're doing that already in the educational system, you already know that they're far beyond that and what they're doing from a military approach. Separate conversation from today, but I'm just pointing that out, that that's how far behind we are in the United States.
That's serious. But thank you for that addition. So our next question up is, what are the security considerations? Do we need to sandbox the kids? Because you are able. I'm actually doing, as a part of my research, like I said, at the intersection of AI and cybersecurity education. the impact of using AI assisted red teaming or offensive security as opposed to traditional approaches towards it. So I guess my question is, you can use AI for things like, I could basically get a shell in like a Linux shell, a Linux terminal in AI, and basically use it to perform attacks and do things. If we have these systems and they're connected to the school systems, and we're allowing our kids to have, access to generative AI, what does the security look like in an education setting?
I guess I'll jump in on that. So, I mean, some of the first things that come to mind, of course, I don't want to use it as a bad analogy, but it's not too far different from some of the same risks as kids having access to weapons or having access to medication or alcohol. There are some serious risks because the only thing worse than somebody who knows how to use something is somebody who's using something that doesn't know how to use it. So there's been DDoS attacks that have happened that have caused major damage from people who are using cyber tools and thinking that they're messing around on somebody's network, and next thing you know, they're bringing down sites, or they're bringing down large area networks that are impacting people. So you give the ability to take AI and parse a repository of cybersecurity techniques, and then you say, okay, I'll replicate this attack and going against my school just because I go to the school and that might be fun. And now I've knocked my school's systems offline, and now we're back to doing everything by pen and paper, while the IT admins at the school are going to be overtaxed trying to get that fixed. I mean, that's a real scenario that could easily happen, and that was coming from somebody that really would only have to do a couple of prompts, perhaps. And that's just where we are right now today. So, you could imagine in a year or two from now, that would be far more advanced than where we are and down the road. But that's just an idea of some of the security risks that could potentially be in place, outside of some of the educational issues that we've talked about. But that's just something that jumps to mind right now.
Yeah, this is a hard question. So I'm glad Jay jumped in first. And Tisha, I actually want to hear your opinion, and Stacey, yours too, especially y'all come with the cyber approach. I'm very interested in the world of like AI avatars and interactive AI tools for kids. But when it comes to security, I'm just trying to figure out like what are the things that we should be thinking about, because I literally don't know, because I'm like, I use AI all the time, like literally daily, and I've been like downloading different tools and trying them out, but I don't care because they already got access to all my stuff anyway. I'm like, my phone is probably recording our conversation at this point. So I'm like, I'm in that place. But for a kid, I don't want a kid to have to deal with that. Like, I'm anti-kids being on Instagram. Like, I'm really weird about like kids' faces showing up and the training that can happen on your kids' voices. Like they were talking about OpenAI was about to, or held off on the release of like a 15-second voice recorder that can basically adopt your voice. I've actually had my voice trained on AI. The first time I did it, it was like 4 hours. The second time I did it, he did it on probably 30 minutes of my podcast. Like I didn't even go through the normal training. I just sent him my podcast episode, and he was able to literally train my voice. And if you hear Claire and look her up, she sounds just like me. She also speaks other languages and all this other stuff. So imagine if a kid is interacting with something, whether it's their physical image, their voice signature, and all these other things, and now they're using voice signature for banks. I just think some things we should keep away from kids, but I don't know what those things are and how you protect kids in this world.
So a situation for your consideration. When we talk about the use of things like, for example, virtual reality, like the headsets, or, basically people entering in like other worlds, or learning through, basically three-dimensional, they talk about the application of those types of systems like within an education system, right? My concern is when you're looking at things like the privacy, when you're looking at things like the security concerns, right? You basically have a device that's attached to my head. You probably, can see what my face, you probably are getting information just from, it being on my head. You know what I'm saying? When we have things like that that are basically on children, I don't know if you're a gamer, but you can play if you run around in the
Yeah,
games
I
or
do
whatever.
the VR, but kids shouldn't be using it, but they are.
But they are, and my point is that once people understand what the threat vectors and what the attack landscape looks like for those types of things, then you have to worry about like adult content popping up in the school system as you have a kid who's maybe playing around and decides to put in the room where they're reviewing, like doing science, virtual science experiences in the VR space, and they're popping up inappropriate things, or finding out information and using information about the people who are using those systems. You know what I'm saying? Because as these systems are learning, they're also learning about the people who are on the other end of the, and not just the questions that they ask, but they can find out things just based on the types of questions, the way that they ask them, maybe whatever the modifications are. So, this is generating a whole lot of data, right? And when we talk about like security concerns, who owns that information and what are they allowed to do with it? You know what I'm saying? Maybe you can extrapolate based on whatever it is that I'm typing, what I'm saying? Like, hey, can you tell me where my local coffee shop is, right? And then the kid puts in like, hey, where can I get this video game, for example, in OpenAI? And then now it has its address, you know what I'm saying? So if someone has access to, that data, or if someone is able to monitor that data, I'm saying now they have their address. Or there's so many, I think, unknowns. We talked about this, I think, in the first episode about the open letter, where people were like, hey, can we take a pause and, just take a beat for a second and just let's look at the ethical, let's look at the legal, let's look at the privacy and the data and the security perspectives of the use of this. I spoke with Marcus Shakari on the last episode, and he was like, we don't need to pause anything. You either get on board or you get left behind, I think was the gist of what he was saying. And I get that, but at the same time, when we think about the misuse of these systems, especially when it comes to vulnerable populations.
Yeah, I'm not. So this is the one topic where I'm like, this does actually scare me and causes me to have angst as to why I don't have a well-formulated answer to your question, because it's something where that has real world implications. Like, I'm an adult. If I decide to give my stuff up, that's me. If my mom lets me as a kid make some decisions that I probably shouldn't make, that's very different to me. And your mom may not know because she or her dad may not know what is happening and how that works. So I have a concern with that. One thing I do appreciate about some of the early AI toys, a lot of them are local. So it's not searching the internet or doing anything like that. You're just interacting with the model that the little AI toy has. And I feel okay with stuff like that, as well as looking at how we teach kids. I'm very nervous about, and this is coming from a person who's all pro for this, I am very nervous on what it means for kids to explore this by themselves with humans who are out there trying to not do the best things for kids. Even in Roblox and these other tools, we've seen what is happening when adults are playing in these spaces. I love Among Us. Kids are always in Among Us, and it's a kid's game, but I love the game, especially the VR version. Like, there's certain things I love, but I'm also like, this kid is 5 years old, shouldn't even have this VR headset on. He or she is now interacting with an adult. Who knows what that adult is saying to them? Possibly, hopefully, most people are trying to do the right thing, but putting kids anywhere where they have an access to a world that is not, doesn't have the yard or the street, right? The street lights can't call you in. You can literally visit the whole world in literally a few seconds. And I don't think we're ready to do that in a way that makes sense. I do know groups like All Things, I think it's All Things Tech. They had a big AI meeting in DC a couple weeks ago on AI protections for kids. So I do know people are thinking about it and trying to figure it out, but I can't answer that question. To me, that's pretty scary.
Yeah, I think the controls for that, just like with anything else, are going to take time to get baked in. And to your point too, Amber and Tennisha, and I think we talked about this in one of our classes too, but when you talk about privacy, so, the United States in particular, is really, I don't want to use the word gung-ho about privacy, but I guess the way that the citizens are, there's a push always for, data privacy in that. And like you said, Amber, nothing to hide. I don't have anything to hide. And that's always like the number one response that somebody has, like, okay, well, this data should be private because it just should be. It's not that I have anything to hide, it just should be private. Earlier, when I was making the comment about some of the advances that China had, and I hate to go back there, I'm not trying to take this out of the education realm, but I'm bringing that up because in that same episode, they were talking to people there in one of the cities in China, and they were asking about privacy. And, you've got a lot of people that are in our degree age group and younger, and all of them, when they were asked a question, they didn't care. So there's already an expectation that there wasn't privacy anyway. Now, you're thinking, okay, well, they, different country, obviously they're not a democracy like we are, but think about that in terms of access to available data for training sets. So right now in the United States, there's a lot of restriction around the data and how it's collected. And because we have so many privacy laws in place, right, that's going to limit usually what they can use. You go to the flip side to one of our adversarial countries, like China, who doesn't have that in place. So on the public side of things, one of the reasons, at least I feel, that they're faster in terms of their research is because they access the data that they have to train with. And if that same data, of course, is going to be accessible on the private and public side of industry, then you already know that it's available to the military. So there are some real world implications for privacy being in place, both on the good side and the bad side of that. So, we've got to get all these things baked in to protect kids. And then we've also got to figure out how to, protect ourselves from a national security standpoint as well. And a lot of that's going to be based on research. So going back to the very first question about why or if, AI should be banned or not banned in schools, I do think there's a lot of, as I said earlier, research that can take place by allowing it in schools so that we can try to work around some of these issues in a real setting versus trying to look at them, always from a theoretical standpoint. We can have some experimental and experiential, data to use to kind of bolster those defenses.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And the funny thing is, until this conversation, like I always talk about data privacy and that side of things, but I haven't had this conversation around AI data privacy for kids. Like, because I always tell people all the time, like, know what's happening with your data, read your terms and conditions, know how they're training on it. I think our laws are not that great. I think we do a good job, but I think like UK and others, or European Union, EU does a little bit of a better job, but I think we're not at the best. We're definitely not the worst. We're somewhere closer to the top of that chain. And I like the idea of what you said, like we need to try it out, and schools is a good place to try things out. Like that's where, I mean, they're trying stuff out anyway. That's what curriculum is about. Like you're learning and experimenting on folks and seeing what's happening. But that makes total sense. But yeah, I'm still like very nervous. Hopefully someone else is thinking about this stuff, because you basically put something for me to sleep and dream about, Tennisha, in my head. And I don't know if I appreciate it.
I'm sorry. Like I take a similar approach that you do. Like at this point, like how many times are they going to leak my address, my social security number? I'm saying it's out there at this point. Like, does it necessarily matter? Like I gave my face over to the government so that I can get on my airplane faster and I have to take my shoes off. I'm saying? Like at this point, I've had a security clearance. They've got my fingerprints at this point. What else do they necessarily have to basically leak at this point? Like my mouth bacteria or something? I don't know. But, I think when it comes to kids and especially when we're talking about education, I think that this has some real world impact in terms of, the quality of humans that we are going to be producing and putting out into the real world at some point, and I feel like that piece alone, in my mind makes me feel like, it needs to go to kids last, right? But I think to Jay's point, earlier in the conversation, when you have, and I think maybe also yours, Amber, like when you have schools that are teaching these things in other countries that are teaching these things to folks at a much younger level, either they address security concerns or they don't necessarily have the same concerns, right? I mean, at that point, we don't want to continue to put, the United States as a, cybersecurity superpower behind the curve. And then from an education perspective, we don't want to put our children behind the curve. but at the same time, you want to make sure that you're trying to keep them safe, but then also make sure that they have, articulate thoughts in their mind that don't involve like a singular word every other sentence. You know what I'm saying? All right. So, last minute thoughts. Ban or no ban? Based on the conversation so far, what are your thoughts? Stacey, I'll start with you.
I say no ban. I know we're kind of worried about the next generation, and I kind of hate to say it, but parenting is an issue. Like, if your kids aren't great communicators, it's probably because you didn't teach them how to communicate. So I think using AI to teach your kids and then having that extra time to speak with them and groom them and teach them how to like interact with like other humans would probably be a great use of time as
Um,
well.
I was going to say also, I forgot to bring this up. You've been researching, what the education landscape looks like for AI. Can you, I guess, real quick, give us a synopsis of what that,
Oh,
what have you been finding? Are there a lot of certifications out there? Are there a lot of things to
there's
train us?
yeah, there's tons of like free stuff like Coursera. Google has an AI certificate. edX has a couple of free what is it? AI and machine learning. IBM has a course as well that you can take. A lot of these are either free or low cost, maybe like $30, $40, $50 a month. There's a lot of, from what I've been researching, Python is like the main language you're going to be learning. So there's tons of YouTube channels that teach Pythons for free. Free Code Camp has a Python for AI course. I think it's about 12 hours, all free. So there's like tons of free resources for you to just kind of get learning and trying to get interested in it and kind of see what you can do with it. So I don't think that's going to be a huge barrier. Like if you're interested in it, the resources are out there and they're pretty free or either low cost to get started. So I would encourage anybody who's looking into learning more about AI to kind of go through some of the free resources to see what it's all about and try to learn more. So
Awesome. All right, Jay, ban or no ban? Any final thoughts?
Sure. So definitely on the no ban list, for sure. I think that AI is definitely that next, or not next. I mean, it's already here. So it is that new wave of, technology that's going to dramatically change how we do things. Similar to the way when computers rolled out and then, phones, those were very close together in terms of the smartphone and computers. But, I think that if you think about just how different there's a difference between people who are brought up, in certain ages, right? Like you do see it even in the workforce. There's certain people that, say if they're in maybe a generation or two ahead of us. Okay, well, they didn't grow up with, cell phones at, 8. I was like 14, I think, when I had my first cell phone. Okay. So for me, it's an innate. Everything that relates to cell phones to me is innate. Even computers, it is. And so for us that go into that line of work, say in IT, there's a lot that we know about the ins and outs because we were using this technology so early on. We were early adopters of this technology. So there's a lot of it that's not foreign to us and we pick it up very quickly. People that are a generation ahead of us or longer, not quite the case. There's still some that are, of course, able to use it, no problem, but there's a large majority that have an issue with that. AI is not going to be any different. It can be a hard concept for people to grasp that are even in our field, that are in IT. If you've watched anything on, like if you watch the news and you look at some of the Congress people, right, that are, trying to push certain things for AI, if you ask them to explain AI, if you listen, because they've asked them, I mean, you can find clips on it on YouTube from newscasts when they've asked them these questions, they don't have an answer, or the answer that they have is generic at best. So that's another reason why having this somehow incorporated in our general education, not in just the private schools like we were talking about earlier, but it needs to be in public schools all across the U.S. that kids are being introduced to this so that it's not a foreign concept to them. The dangers, can be understood. You know, a lot of parents were teaching the dangers of, being on computers at an early age. Watch out for chat rooms. We know about that. Kids that had, cell phone adopters early on, be careful for messages from people and things you shouldn't be doing, on that cell phone, right? Same concepts, let's apply them to AI, but the only way that we can do that is to get it in the hands of, the general population at a young age, so that as they're coming up behind us, they can be on that forefront and continue on and really advance the, AI's abilities and what it can do and how we can use it safely, to the best of our ability, because there's always going to be challenges, but I think it needs to be in the schools and therefore does not need to be banned.
AI.
So, Jay, you make me think about something. I was like, when did I first get AI Instant Messenger or AOL Instant Messenger, AIM? And I was like, I was young. I was like probably between 5th and 7th grade, somewhere in there. And I was in chat rooms. I don't know if my mom knew I was in chat rooms with the whole dial-up situation, but I was in them and I was able to responsibly interact in chat rooms and knew to stay away from creepers, because I learned in the real world to stay away from creepers. So if there were creepers online, I also knew to stay away from them. So I think that's also important, Jay, to your point, is that when you're teaching your kid just how to navigate being a kid in this world and helping them to learn how to do it in a new way, I think that's important. I also think kids are when you're born is a time you were meant to be born in, and you figure it out. Like, we were born in a weird space where we had typewriters, and then we all went to computers and then laptops. So we saw everything within a small amount of time, but they literally were born into this. And they're already so, like, at 2 years old, I'm seeing kids, whether you agree or if they should be on or not, either way, I'm seeing kids at 2 years old being able to navigate a tablet, being able to not read, but able to get it to read back to it, or using the voice to say, do this, do this, whatever, Google, Siri, or whoever else you're dealing with. They're literally using it now in a way that allows them to interact and allows a different part of their brain to work. So I think they're going to figure it out, let them use it with restrictions around it. So with all that being said, y'all said the most. I'm very interested in what Tennisha has to say, and if she believes in not or banning or not ban, but I am not banning AI this week.
Look, man, it's a no for me, dog. Like, I'm 100% on Team Ban, and I'm mad I didn't bring this up earlier. But my other issue, outside of the security issue, has to do with the bias and the perpetuation of bias through the use of AI. So, we have a lot of people right now who are trying to reimagine or revisit history in a way that is not necessarily accurate. And my concern is, if these systems are being trained with data that is contains this revisionist history, that not only do we lose, especially for these kids that are using these tools to write papers, research papers, or fake research papers, I should say, we're losing the reality of history. You know what I'm saying? And who's teaching it, and not to mention, but like, first and foremost, the privacy, the security concerns, and I know you mentioned earlier AI about the uses in healthcare, the uses in, someone mentioned surgery, until they can get better as far as it's handling of people of color and different differences in terms of simple things like complexion. I don't know if I necessarily want to doing anything for me, for real. But I mean, that's just my thought. So, all right. Well, I appreciate you guys coming in. Any last minute plugs? Anything that you want to drop? Talk about projects you're working on, things you've got coming up.
As always, AI Meets AI is available on Amazon. Check it out. And we'll be launching some other AI workshops and tools later this fall. So that's it for me. And I hate that you ended that way, so I couldn't respond. Next time.
Next time. Also, I was about to say, also, you have your podcast as well, right? Do you want to plug that?
Yeah, that'll be coming out in the fall as well. I'm producing an AI. So, you don't know this. I'm switching over from AI to Coast System to focus purely on kids. I love adults. We don't learn as fast as kids do. And I think there is a gap in helping kids learn about this technology. So I will be producing a podcast focused on teaching AI for kids and moving from adults. But the goal is AI for kids and their parents, so they can listen to it together in the car and learn together on what they should be thinking about. And I likely was going to reach out to you. So you'll see a message on me reaching out to talk about some of this stuff.
That's dope. Thank you. Jay, what's up?
Yeah, nothing to plug. I just wanted to say again, thanks so much for the invite. Hope I get a chance to come back because I actually had a really good time. It's my first time doing something like this, and really had a good time being able to talk with you all about this hot topic. So thank you all for this. I much appreciate it.
Not a problem, sir. Stacey.
Nothing to plug for myself, but I would like to plug Black Girls Hat. Thank you for inviting me. Join everybody who's watching. You don't have to be Black. You don't have to be a girl. Just join. Everybody's welcome. Thank you.
Hey, that's my kind of plug. All right. Well, this has been AI Thoughts Online. Thank you guys for coming out. And we'll be back again with another episode, hopefully next week. Take care.